We live in a context where we have a say in who governs us and the policies that get implemented. And Scripture is really clear that sin is not only doing things that are wrong, it's failing to do things that are right.
I think the point you make is important because people can take the silence as agreement. And our pastor has challenged us and said, as Christians, we aren't called to blend in, we're called to stand out. But be careful what we stand out for and what we want to be known as. So I know I want to run my business and I want people to believe our business is Christian based. What can you say to maybe encourage people to take a stand and to test those waters rather than fly under the radar?
Well, and we can't outsource it to a trade association for a number of reasons. Number one is, what values are they taking to the courthouse? I mean, it's one thing when we're just talking about kind of basic economic policies or, the reach of the federal government into this area or that area. What we're talking about now are championing of causes that are, in some cases, directly anti-biblical or squeezing out the ability of people of faith to live out their deep convictions in the public square. So whose values are they taking there? If you're silent and you outsource it, you can't be sure that they're taking your values and your worldview. The business community has access to political influence like very few others do. Politicians will take the call from CEOs. They will, take the meeting with business owners because you not only represent economic opportunity, but you represent an awful lot of employees and a lot of business partners and a lot of other investors. It's just a hugely strategic leverage point. And I think many business owners underestimate how much access they have to that political process.
So we need to tell the story from our view, because that's exactly how I got started in advocacy myself, was somebody said, just come share your testimony and how this particular situation would impact you. And I went and told the story, and I was astounded at the number of people who had no idea that an unintended consequences was one I mentioned. We are a democracy. We do have a voice. We aren't a culture that this stuff is imposed upon us. We do have a say, and it is a dereliction of duty.
You were able to speak out on a particular issue in a way that was profound, that was different than the dominant cultural narrative, in which somebody else had been claiming for at least a couple years now to speak on your behalf. And to be able to speak out there and say, wait a minute, you're missing this from your perspective, was a very, very powerful thing. And I think whether we're talking about the uniqueness of this business owner because they're in this industry, or the uniqueness of this business owner because of their background as an immigrant or as a woman or as a ethnic minority in some way or another, or as a person of faith or whatever, these angles offer specific insights that the dominant narrative not only often misses, but often tramples. And I think we need to think about that. When we talk about the call of God on our lives and, in this sort of way, we need to think about it in terms of not just what are we responsible for, what's the right thing, but what does it mean to love our neighbor as ourselves? And sometimes the best way to love our neighbor is to take an unpopular stand that's going to end up costing us something.
That's an important point that you bring up, because I think even starting the conversation is scary for people. So do you have words of advice on how to approach somebody when you know you have a different standpoint, but it's important that you speak up and voice yours, and what to do if it begins to escalate? Because people don't seem to have a patience or a tolerance for anybody else with a different opinion.
Let it be because we're for something bigger and better. Let it be out of love for neighbor, not out of anger and not out of hate. And that requires, I think, a level of personal commitment and clarity to what's true and good. Can you imagine how much that would transform national media if that were the principle? Well, you know what? It's because we live in a culture with high temperatures. So if we actually live that out, it demonstrates, first of all, that we're confident in what we believe, and secondly, that we care about the person.